This is a short demo of the new Sveltos tech support feature. Tech support allows collecting logs, events, and resources from both the management cluster and all the managed clusters. All data collected can be delivered to Slack, WebEx, Telegram, Discord, SFTP, and by email. For this demonstration, I have prepared 3 clusters: an Elastic Kubernetes service, a Google Kubernetes engine, and a Civo cluster. All those clusters are controlled by Sveltos. The Civo cluster is using version 1.305, the EKS cluster is using version 1.314, and the GKE cluster is using version 1.306. The management cluster is a Kind cluster where I have installed Sveltos, and from there I manage all my cloud clusters. I've prepared a tech support instance, and we can look at the tech support YAML file. On-demand is set to true, which means that as soon as I'm going to create the tech support instance in the management cluster, as well as going to collect all the necessary resources, I want the collected data to be sent over Slack. And the secret in the default namespace called Slack contains the channel where I want this information to be sent. What kind of resources should I gather? I am planning to gather the cluster profile, the cluster summary across all namespaces, and the speaker instance within the Sveltos project's namespace. I'm also instructing Sveltos to gather all logs from every part within the project Sveltos namespace. Additionally, I want to collect all events within this namespace. There is an additional section for management. In this part, I have a cluster selector that chooses the clusters I want to gather data from. I'm matching all clusters with a label type production and 0, including both EKS and GKE clusters, all at this level. And I'm telling Sveltos that I want to collect all config maps in the project Sveltos namespace. And I want to collect logs on the project Sveltos namespace and the Cube system namespace. But for the logs in the Cube system namespace, I only want to collect the last 10 minutes of log. And finally, I want to collect all the events in the project Sveltos namespace. I'm going to apply tech support instance. As soon as this tech support is created, Sveltos is going to start collecting data, and I expect a notification to be delivered here with all the collected data. The tech support has been collected. This is the attachment. It's called Sveltos Tech Support tar GZ and contains all the information needed to ask Sveltos to collect. We can download and look at this file. So it does contain 2 subdirectories, the management cluster directory and the managed clusters directory. Let's begin with the management cluster. It has 3 subfolders: events, logs, and resources, plus a file named version.txt. This file shows the version of my management cluster, which we noted was 1.3.2.0. The resources directory contains all the resources that I want to collect, and I want to collect a cluster profile. Cluster profiles are cluster-wide resources, so we can see that there are 2 cluster profiles. We can look at one of the cluster profiles. This cluster profile, it is a cluster profile, and it has the spec, and it has the status section. And the status section contains all the clusters that are matching this instance. Cluster summary contains namespace and resources, so when I go inside the cluster summary, it's telling me that it found cluster summary instances in those 3 namespaces: Civo, EKS, and GKE. If we go into the Civo namespace, we find the cluster summary, which is present in this namespace. If we go into the EKS namespace directly, we find the cluster summary, which is in this EKS namespace, and same for the GKE. When I look at the logs, I asked Sveltos to gather the logs from every port in the Sveltos project's namespace. I can see all the pods from these Sveltos and the logs from all these pods. And finally, the events directory contains all the events on the project Sveltos namespace, which are sorted. We return to the beginning. The managed cluster folder has a subdirectory for each managed cluster, which was matching the cluster selector. This is how simple it is with Sveltos to gather what's necessary for debugging. In this instance, I use support. It's going to gather all the resources and data I need if someone encounters an issue with Sveltos and I need to debug it offline. The technical support can be scheduled when needed, as I did in this example, or it can be scheduled using a cron job. And it can be delivered to Slack, WebEx, Discord, Telegram, email, and SFTP. Thank you for watching.